Hello and welcome in to another episode of the Calcio Connection podcast. We are connecting with you, Italian football fans from all over the world. Alex Donno alongside my co-host Jerry Mancini. As always, we're joined by special guest, host and producer of the Forza Napoli pod, Joe Fischetti is also with us. And, Jerry, I got to start with you. It's crazy today. We're recording this on Saturday afternoon, okay? Lazio and Juventus are playing tomorrow. Napoli, Bologna playing tomorrow. Inter, Atalanta, which is actually Atalanta Inter. It's in Bergamo. So for the three of our teams, this is kind of the calm before the storm today. But more wild COVID headlines with Lazio, with all these weird inconsistencies in the testing. And I do want your take on it here in a second. But the news here on Saturday morning before the matchup with Juventus on Sunday, we had thought up until hours ago that Immobile, Strakosha, Leva would be back, but they were forced to leave the training ground this morning with inconclusive COVID-19 tests. So they seem to be out of action. They are not going to play against Juventus tomorrow. So this very much, Jerry, changes the outlook of Lazio's clash with Juve tomorrow. It's going to make it that much tougher for Lazio to win this match. And then, of course, we all also throw in there, and I know people have been asking you questions about this, Jerry, because you're everyone's favorite Laziali. This throws in so many questions about people wondering, is Lotito breaking the rules? Is Lazio covering up COVID-19 tests? Lazio going to get relegated? They're going to get punished? All of these topics have been thrown out there for the last couple of days. Jerry, your head must be ready to explode with all the questions you're getting about this.
I used up all my data yesterday, let's just say. I was at my store waiting for an hour and a half for my order, on my phone reading everything. I used 10 gigs. I don't know how I used 10 gigs in an hour and a half. I smashed it all. I was like, you know what? I learned my when Napoli versus Juventus, and I kind of like jumped the gun and I sent a tweet that was really harsh, and I called out Juventus fans, and I learned my lesson not to jump the gun this time, and until all the facts are there, don't. And that's what's actually happened. Yesterday, it was positive, then negative. Today is positive, and I'm not gonna defend or go against Lazio until things are actually proven. That's why I haven't really said anything on Twitter. I see a lot of people acting as if they're they know everything. They know all the details. But at the end of the day, until Lazio confirms and the FIGC confirm together what everything is happening, it's all going to be speculation. Now, I'll give you my thoughts. First off, I don't think Claudio Lotito would forge signatures and change information on documents that are being submitted from a laboratory to Serie A and to UEFA. I think he knows that as he changes any information that he's at risk. You think he would risk one game and someone's life for the rest of the season? I don't think so, personally. That's me. What I don't like about Lazio is how it's so difficult to confirm that someone has COVID. Like yesterday, and I'll say I respect Roma saying Edin Dzeko has COVID-19.
Yeah.
Like, what does it take to say that Ciro Immobile has COVID-19?
I mean,
Just
Jerry,
say it.
this morning, Inter tweeted Daniele Padelli, the third string keeper, has COVID-19. They said it flat out. He tested positive.
I just don't get their communications and like how they're revealing the information, and even if they're not doing anything wrong and they're following guidelines, it gives a bad image, a bad misinterpretation about what the team is actually doing. And so when teams are not withdrawing information, it starts to make you think, well, what's going on? What's going to happen behind closed doors? So the result, I would say, is that if Lazio is at wrongdoing, I agree they should go back to Serie B. There should be significant punishment. I agree. Like I will be the first to say it. No Lazio fan will probably say that they should go to Serie B. You're dealing with someone's life, and if a guy like Immobile who has kids, let's say for example, and didn't know that his test results were actually what he was supposed to know, I think that's wrong, and he's putting other people's lives at jeopardy. Now, if Lazio has been doing everything right and just don't want to release information for their own personal reason, then they shouldn't be reprehended. They shouldn't be disciplined for anything. But at the end of the day, they've already said that. Iglitari said, doors open, all the information's there, we're not going to stop you. So for him to say that means that they haven't done anything. And if he was nervous, he would probably defend against the fact that they're coming in for information. So that's where I go. I'm not an expert on this. I just think that a lot of people on Twitter are hiding behind a screen thinking that, oh, Lotito did this wrong and that wrong. Yeah, his comments are stupid. I agree. The way he thinks, the way he talks, it makes no sense to me. But at the end of the day, I just don't see why he would put people's lives in jeopardy. This is a guy who wears a mask everywhere, does his testing every 3 days, he said. Like, he went to the meetings, the FIGC meetings, whatever, the Serie A meetings. He was wearing a mask. Like, I don't see... He hasn't shown anything to contradict himself against the COVID cases about everything that has to be done. So I know everyone wants to win, but it just doesn't make sense to me. And Joel, you said one good point that you'll probably address after is they need to, and Lotito touched on this, is that Serie A and UEFA have to have the same testing consistently. Like, you can't, like, Serie A has 2 strands, I believe, or 2 testings they do, and then UEFA has 3 strands, or I'm not sure, like, the whole terminology of everything. But if 2 leagues have 2 different types of testing, you're going to have 2 different results.
It happened with Achraf Hakimi. I mean, the same thing happened to Inter, right? Where, he was ruled out of the first Champions League match because they said the morning of the UEFA testing had him positive for COVID-19. And then the next day or 2 days after that, the Serie A testing said he didn't have it. So, I mean, I personally, and obviously I'm not a Lazio fan, but I'm also not biased. I'm certainly not biased against or for Lazio. Joe, I feel like I need more information before I'm going to start like a witch hunt of saying that, and I'm not a huge Lotito fan, but I need more proof that he's actually actively breaking the rules and potentially, harming people in a pandemic. I'm not ready to make that leap yet.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said we need more information, and Jerry alluded to that too. This, as a Napoli supporter, we kind of went through this with the whole situation with the not showing up for the Juventus match. And that weekend, bits and pieces of information were being leaked, letters, things like that. And then people were filling in the gaps. Did the ASL ban them from traveling, for example, in the Napoli case? In the Lazio case, I don't think the situation's helped by 2 things. The first is, Jerry mentioned the comments that Lotito's making and the team doctor's making, that I think the team doctor said, if you're not symptomatic, you should be allowed to play even if you have tested positive. So that's obviously cast a lot of doubt on what's going on inside the club. And then the other one that Jerry mentioned is the different testing standards. I read an article, I think it was on Football Italia. They interviewed an expert on these things, and he went into the intricacies of it. And I plan on doing a pod that gets into the weeds on that, because that's kind of what I do. But they talked about how those 2 different ways of testing can show that one player is positive and on UEFA's test, but negative on Serie A's test. Mm-hmm. And I think I agree with you guys as well that Lazio would be helping their own cause if they came out and at least identified the people that they've tested positive using the Serie A standard. If you look at the pattern and who's come in and out of the squad, there are players that have just not been there. Luis Alberto, Manuel Lazzari, Thomas Strakosha, those guys have just not been there. I'm pretty sure they have tested positive on both sides. Ciro Immobile, for example, he may be one of those guys that he's testing negative with Serie A's test, testing positive with UEFA's test, because he's kind of coming in and out of the lineup. So, I mean, from a PR standpoint, I think they would help themselves by identifying who those guys are that they know definitively are positive. The other thing that I read just quickly is that's again casting some doubt on the whole situation is apparently Lazio were doing their tests at a different lab in Rome instead of Avellino where everyone else is doing it. So again, all of these things, these odd behaviors are leading people to be suspicious. And I think that's why there's this investigation.
Well, and also Claudio Lotito doesn't exactly paint himself in the best light when he has quotes like this. And I don't know if I even want to break this down too much because it's kind of gross. So I don't, but I'm not even sure if I understand the point he's trying to make here. Okay. And I read it in both Italian and English, and I think there were a few of these Italian words that I'm not maybe fluent enough that I didn't really understand until the English translation. Even with the English translation, I'm still not sure I understand what his point is here. But Lazio president Claudio Lotito made this COVID metaphor. He said, positive means contagious, right? There are bacteria in the vaginas of all women in the world. That doesn't mean they are pathogens. Like, I'm not even sure. Like, Jerry, can you understand to me the point he's trying to make? Like, is he trying to say that just because somebody has an illness or has a bacteria doesn't mean they're actually spreading it? I think that's what he's trying to say, right? That basically he's echoing what the Lazio doctor said, was that positive doesn't mean contagious if you're asymptomatic. That's the most sense I can make out from that.
I don't know, man. I don't get these guys or what they're trying to describe, or I'm not even going to elaborate on this. Like, I think the doctor's an idiot for even saying that. If you're positive, but if you're not positive or whatever, what would you say if you're positive but you're asymptomatic, that you're okay to play or something like that?
Yeah.
That doesn't that goes against everything you're not supposed to be doing, right? Like, I hope that's not the case that's happening with Lazio, because that's really bad. Because that can really lead somewhere really bad for them. But I don't know. I don't know what Lotito ever Lotito talks gibberish. Okay, let's just get this straight. He's gibberish, and he talks in his own way, and that's just the personality he is. Like, the person he is. I don't know what he's trying to say. I read it this morning at work, and I was just so confused about what he was trying to explain. But he did touch on some other points that, like we said before, that there has to be one consistent way of, like, UEFA and Serie A doing the testing both the same way. And that's something that he wants to fix and is willing to do. But based on his, like, metaphor there, I don't know what he's trying to talk about.
Well, so let me just before we get into some other topics, let's just put a bow on the Lazio COVID thing, and then we'll move on to a game pick for their matchup with Juventus. So, like, just in conclusion, like, I want to make sure Jerry gets this out here so people can understand your train of thought. Like, we all want to see more information. We want to see actually something proven before we jump to conclusions. But at the end of the day, Jerry, like, you would agree that if they do find damning evidence against Lazio, you would agree that they deserve to be punished for that severely. I just think none of the three of us are actually sure we can make that leap yet, correct?
Absolutely. I think that if there's any evidence that proves that they are wrong, you have to discipline them. This is not this is very severe, and it'll make me start thinking twice about Lazio. Maybe I don't know. Stuff like this, I don't tolerate. I love the team and I love everything about the team, but there's just always something surrounding this club that sometimes makes it very hard to be a fan at times. And this is one of those. There's circumstances where it shouldn't even be happening right now. This shouldn't be a case. Like, it's some fans are right. It's only Lazio this is happening to. Like, I don't know any other teams I know that there are other teams that have one case with a player where it went negative and positive, two different leagues, but, like, more than one player having difficulty to release information and what's going on with their labs and why are testing, like today they did tests in Rome, rapid tests, and I was asking my wife about what the heck is a rapid test, and apparently they do, like, really quick tests within a half an hour. It's done, you get the result. Whereas Avellino is more thorough. Like, they actually go through the strand, they examine everything, so it's more in detail. So I don't know. Like, I just think that Serie A should just go to one lab and everyone's within the same lab, and that's it. Not that you choose a lab, he chooses a lab. You get all this bullshit, different, like, results and, like, different testings. And, like, I think if you go to one source, it will probably eliminate all these headaches. That's just my opinion on this, though. Like, I don't know. I could be wrong. But when you start seeing, like, people making accusations, Lazio is dumb, Lazio shouldn't have done this, and, like, and I didn't even know that Gazzetta dello Sport was owned by Caro, that piece of shit. I hate that guy. That guy's a piece of shit. I'm sorry, man. Lotito and Cairo should go in a ring. I saw this on IFTV. They said that Lotito should go in a ring and just duke it out. And I honestly think that Lotito will put this guy in another world. I think that Lotito would just like, who do you think would win in a fight, Cairo or Lotito?
Lotito for sure. He's got the rage, and he would probably fight a little bit dirty. Like he'd probably sneak in like a groin shot when the referee's not looking, right? An eye poke. He would do whatever it takes to put Cairo down.
Oh man! Hey, anybody watching this or listening, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this whole Lazio bullshit scandal. And I want honest opinions. I don't want cheap shots. If you're gonna give me cheap shots, you're getting blocked. I'll tell you right now. I don't have time for Lazio cheap shots of this scandal. I know it's bullshit and everything, but that's all I have to say.
So it's going to be a lunchtime kick, Italian time, 12:30 p.m. on Sunday. Lazio hosting Juventus at the Olimpico. Assuming that no Immobile, Nostra Coscia, Leva, among others, like initially thinking, especially that Ciro was going to play. My pick over the last couple of days, I actually was expecting the game to be a draw, maybe like a 1-1 or a 2-2. But, this information about who we expect Lazio not to have available has changed my pick. I mean, Juve, over the last week, they have gotten a boost. Players coming back from COVID. Ronaldo made his triumphant return last week, helping elevate Juventus to beat Spezia. They were struggling 1-1 before he came on in the second half. He really made a difference. They've had Weston McKennie back, who's, for the most part played well this year. So I'm gonna go with Juventus. So not that they've really been impressive to start the season, but for this one, especially with who Lazio is going to have missing, I'm going to go with Juventus in a 2-1. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, my train of thought was essentially the same. If this was the full strength squads on both sides, I think I'd be leaning towards a draw. Juventus we still haven't figured them out yet, right? Like they've struggled against even some weaker sides, Crotone, for example. They've got some wins, but again, weaker clubs. Spezia, you mentioned, Ferencvaros in Champions League, so you don't really know, but Ronaldo is a difference maker. Like you said, Weston McKennie's been really good. And as much as he gets called offside and loses a lot of goals for it, Alvaro Morata has been really good for Juventus. And he just, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because he's passionate about playing at Juventus, but he plays better for them than he has played at other clubs, Chelsea, Atletico Madrid. With Lazio missing so many key players, they had to sit back and defend against Zenit. And thankfully for Lazio fans, Felipe Caicedo has been pretty clutch in the last couple of matches, but I can't see them doing it against a club the size of Juventus. So I'd give Juventus a 2 or 3-1 win in this one.
What do you think, Cherry?
I'm going to go off the grid here and say that I think Lazio has a really decent chance, and I'll say why. Let's just say that Immobile and Leva are playing tomorrow. Do they really make a difference? Honestly, they haven't been training for over a week. They're only getting one training practice. One training session. So at the end of the day, they would have, at most, would have played 20 minutes tomorrow. And we saw last weekend against Torino, they looked out of shape. They didn't look in form. Immobile didn't make a dent coming off the bench other than converting the penalty. And he made that, I like the attitude he showed after they conceded their goal. But other than that, he was really not running. And if you watch Simone Inzaghi on the sideline, he's screaming at Immobile saying, "Let's go, run." But he can't run because he's not in form. Yeah. So, and then you got Leva. This might be better that Leva doesn't even play because he's not fit either, and he's had injury problems this season. So, based on the match preview I have today, Leva, Immobile, and Strakosha are the main guys out. Radu's coming back to the lineup tomorrow. He's been training for the last 2 weeks. I expect Lulic to be back in the lineup tomorrow. Sorry, I have him unavailable, but you see me now? Is that better? Is that better, Alex?
I can see you. I think it was I think it was Joe that we were frozen for.
Okay. Yeah, you got Radu Lulic all coming back. You got Lazio back tomorrow. That's a big boost. He won't be starting, but he comes off the bench, can make a difference. Cataldi will be in the midfield tomorrow. He's back. So I don't doubt that this team can't win. I think they have a lot of heart, and I think compared to last year, they have depth. They got a guy like Andrea Pereira, who they didn't have last year. Vedat Morici, who's slowly starting to come around with this team. I know Mohamed Fares has looked decent at times, looked a little sluggish at times, but there's a lot of strengthening in this squad. Wesley Hoot has looked really good since coming back from his second stint, and along with you got a Juventus side that doesn't have Chiellini tomorrow and no Aaron Ramsey. You have Ronaldo, who's not fully fit. I don't know if he'll start. And if he starts, I don't know if he'll be able to go a whole 90 minutes because he's only came back and played what? He came back last Saturday. He's only played 2 games.
Yeah.
Like his form, we don't know what his form is like. Dybala is struggling. He hasn't looked like the same player that he was last year. I do agree that Alvaro Morata has looked really good in recent time. He's probably been their best player. Their back line is really iffy tomorrow. Very iffy. Like that's a front line that Lazio can exploit. Luis Felipe is supposed to start tomorrow. There's an encouraging player that's coming back to the lineup. I know he's made of glass, but we know that when he plays Juventus, he always brings the best out of himself. He scored last year. I remember that the header off a free kick off Luis Alberto, and Luis Alberto is back tomorrow. So there is a lot of players coming back to this lineup that, although yeah, you're missing Immobile. Is it the end all for Lazio without Immobile? In the last 5 games, they have proven that they can win without him.
Caicedo time, baby.
Hey, Caicedo comes off the bench. He's proving to be a difference maker. I'm just saying, don't rule out this side compared to last year. I think that Latito was being criticized for not buying players in the summer, not getting enough players to help the squad. I think we're starting to see that depth being tested with up to 12 players were all against Club Brugge. 7 players were missing against Zenit. And we saw players step up and they managed to score goals and get 2 pivotal draws in the Champions League. They're undefeated in Champions League that without some of their best players. They pulled off an impressive win against Torino. Yeah, I know everybody's going to say, well, Immobile scored the 3rd goal. But guess what? He didn't score the other 3. They still got goals from somebody. So I just think that they have players tomorrow that they can make a difference. I think they just have to have the right mindset and just have to be motivated and ready to go and not just be so Immobile dependent. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. They're not being Immobile dependent in recent time.
I want to move on to Atalanta hosting Inter. That's going to be a 3 p.m. start Italian time, 9 a.m. for the 3 of us in North America in the Eastern time zone. I'm glad I took Jerry's recommendation when I was driving home from work yesterday evening. I listened to the latest episode of Serie A Awesome on ESPN FC, which I do enjoy, but I hadn't heard the show since this season. The last time I'd heard it was Gab, Marcotti, and Nicky Bandini, and Mina Rizuki. Mina and Nicky are still on the show, and Matteo Bonetti and Kay Murray are on the show now as well. But, Jerry recommended I listen to this episode, and I'm glad I did. I nearly drove off the road, okay, hearing what Mina Rizuki was saying about Antonio Conte, okay? And you guys know, if you've been watching the show and listening to us, I'm not a huge Conte fan, right? I mean, the guy is making 12 million net, and Inter they've only won 1 game in their past 7. Like he's not justifying the salary. The squad has been disappointing, and they had some moments last year, but no trophies last year, no trophies yet under Conte. So I'm a little bit frustrated with Inter, and I don't think everything that Conte does is great. I think that his substitutions have been very questionable lately, but hearing Mina Rizuki say that Conte should have been sacked immediately after the Real Madrid loss, my head nearly exploded. And she, she's not the only one that's thinking stuff like that oh no, they need to sack Conte now. I mean, first of all, for as frustrated as I've been with Inter, I'm a fan, so I'm always going to be frustrated when they're not winning and when they're not top of the table, and seeing, their crosstown rival Milan being top of the table. All of that stuff is frustrating, but I understand a couple things. If you're going to have this ridiculous chatter about sacking Conte in the first week of November right now, you do have to understand that they've been pretty decimated by COVID and injury troubles. Romelu Lukaku has missed the last couple games. Now, really good news, Romelu Lukaku is going to be back in the squad for the Atalanta game. I don't know if he's going to start. He may be someone that they bring off the bench, but I mean, he's been sorely missed in these last couple of days when they had a disappointing 2-2 draw with Parma and then a disappointing result, but they played very well, I thought, against Real Madrid. So Lukaku has been very missed. But you think about, 7 players having dealt with COVID this season, having to deal with injuries to Lukaku and more injuries to Stefano Sensi. I should be used to that by now. You're 5 points off first place, but you've only played 5 matches in Serie A. So to hear Mina Rizzuki or anybody say that, no, Conte should have been sacked last week, it's insane, given that, Inter hasn't really fully had a chance to find their form with so many players out with COVID or with injuries. I need to be a little bit more patient than that. And then the other side of it is, and I know, Jerry, we talked about this a little bit midweek in our last episode. If you're going to sack Conte November or December, whenever, if you want to sack him this early before Christmas, you better be sure you have a damn good replacement, okay? Because if it's not Max Allegri, right, if you're just going to say, oh, we're going to sack Conte, but we're just going to bring in like Esteban Cambiasso as a caretaker, or, oh, we're still paying Luciano Spalletti. Let's have Spalletti leave his vineyard in Tuscany and take over till the end of the season. Like, is that really an upgrade? And keep in mind, if you sack Conte before Christmas, you still have to pay the remainder of his salary. So if you're someone like me and thinks, oh, he's underperforming, for 12 million net per season, keep in mind, you fire him, you still have to pay him the rest of that 12 million this season and 12 million for next season, and pay somebody else on top of it. And one thing, if I can say one thing to Conte's credit, at least so far, now this could spin out of control with another loss or two, but at least he hasn't had a meltdown yet. So clearly he's trying to be a little bit more positive and a little bit more optimistic. But I don't know, Joe, we haven't talked to you about the whole Conte mess. And again, I don't deny that it's been a frustrating start with Inter. They've wasted a lot of scoring chances. They've pulled up some draws in games that they probably should have won, and maybe a loss in a game they could have drawn against Milan. So it's been frustrating. Champions League has been frustrating. But what do you make of the whole Conte topic?
Yeah, I agree with you. We texted about this offline as well, that I thought your take was one of the better ones out of the Inter experts that I follow on your last episode. Even though, yeah, it looks pretty concerning to have only one win in your last 7 matches. But I agree both on the financial side, especially during COVID when your revenues are down. And I agree on it just when we don't have enough of a sample size. Yeah, it's been a bad start, but if this start tells us anything, it is that it confirms Serie A is going to be very competitive this year. And something that I mentioned on my podcast, because, Napoli fans, a lot of them, not all, lost their minds when we lost to Sassuolo, thinking that, listen, this was our year to win the Scudetto. It's up for grabs. We got to go get it. And when we lost that match, the world was on fire. So what I did was I went back to, I can't remember what season it was that Serie A, I think 2003, 2004, that Serie A expanded to 20 teams. And I worked out the average points that the champions earned during that stretch. And I think it was 88 points. The maximum points you could earn in a 38-game season is 114. So when you do the math, that means on average, the champions lose the equivalent of nearly 9 matches per season. So that tells you that, yeah, you don't want to lose them all right up front, but it's not the end of the world to lose a match or two at the beginning of the season. And I think this year, because of the competitiveness of Serie A this season and because of COVID and players coming in and out of squads, that champion point total may be one of the lowest we've seen, who knows how long. So I'm definitely not ruling out. I think, there are some concerns, and I think there's still opportunity to make up some ground. Probably the most shocking thing for me, and I think Alex, you touched on this as well, is that, and maybe it was part of the agreement with Conte when they had that big meeting with all the brass of the club, and they decided not to go with the younger players and go with the more veteran players, is that Conte is not allowed to lose it in the media, because I've been waiting for that to happen and it hasn't happened yet. Maybe it will if this continues, but that's probably the biggest shock for me so far.
Jerry, what do you think? Do you agree with Mina Rizuki that Conte should have been sacked 4 days ago?
I'm gonna go off the record. I think she's an idiot. I think she's an idiot. I think her takes are terrible. I think she's just very negative. Everything that comes out of her mouth that I've heard in the last 2 episodes are so, like, it makes me want to bite my lip. But then I start listening to Matteo and I hear Nikki Bandini, and I'm like, okay, Bandini's on the show, and I just like her takes because she's very concise and right to the point, and her ideas. I think she's one of the best in the business. I just want to know how Mina has a job, because it inspires me to even do the job even more when I hear her takes. She also mentioned that she wanted Gianpaolo fired. And I know that we're talking about Inter and Atalanta, but hold on for a second. And Joe, you've mentioned this before too. I don't think Torino, and I hate Cairo. We know this now.
We know. We found that out 10 minutes ago. Yeah, we know.
But I still think that Gianpaolo was unfortunate last weekend. I think Lazio were a little lucky to win the game, I'll be honest. But the whole officiating was terrible the whole game. But aside from that, I think that Torino has really elevated its game and gotten much better as the season has progressed. And as opposed to what Milan looked like last year under Gianpaolo, where it didn't get better at any time in the first 7 games of his tenure, I think that this season, like in his first 5-6 games, have gotten better, not worse. And I know that it's a sport driven by results, but I think in this situation, I think the results shouldn't really overlook the situation right now. And like we're saying, it's a season that's really different. It's not like other seasons. I think Gianpaolo has done a better job. And Vito Doria, who is a Sampdoria fan, has also touched upon that. He's starting to have that exciting brand of football that he had at Sampdoria, and it's slowly transitioning into Torino as well. But back to Atalanta and Inter, I don't agree with her. I think that Antonio Conte is not in the hot seat. I think that he has been in an unfortunate situation where he's had, just like Lazio, so many COVID cases. I think he was missing 6 or 7 players against Milan. You give that guy a healthy squad versus Milan, they get destroyed 4-0. They don't even come close to winning that game. And I just think that there's a lot of outliers here that are preventing them from winning more games that they should have. I do agree that his substitutions are a little late, sometimes questionable of who he's bringing on for who. We saw that in the last game where I think he only used 3 substitutions out of 5, didn't bring in Christian Eriksen, which blows my mind still. I think you have to put aside your hatred, and you have to do what's best to help you win games. Bringing on Gagliardini, which I love his work ethic, but in the situation they're in at that moment doesn't make a difference. He doesn't help you win the game. He kind of helps you maybe hold a lead or maintain it, but like
exactly. And like what you're saying there, when I think at the time that they brought him on, it was 2-2. So it really sent the message when they brought Gagliardini on that, hey, we're trying to hold this game and we're content with this result and we're not trying to win the game. And I think karma gets in the way there. Like the football gods see a manager make a substitution like that to say, hey, we're not even trying to win this. We're trying to hold on to the result. And 8 times out of 10, you end up blowing the result when you make a move like that.
And I think Mina also touched on, why do you take off Barella? And why do you take off Perisic? And Bandini said a good point. Well, Barella has played every game. Yeah. The guy's played every minute. Like you can't expect him to play 90 minutes every game up until now. He's burnt. Like and Perisic, I don't know. Maybe he should have stayed on. That I can see it. It can go both ways.
He was actually playing well. miracle. He was playing. He scored. He was playing well in that game.
So, but I don't know. At the end of the day, guys, it is what it is. I thought that they played a very good attacking game that Inter hasn't shown in a while, and I think that's something that Matteo was alluding on as well, which was a really good point. This is what I look at too, though. The type of player that Barella has become, Bastoni, Sensi when he's healthy, they have gone to another level because of one reason: Antonio Conte. If Antonio Conte is not their manager, is Barella as good as he is today? I probably don't think so right now. I think he'd be a good player, but not as good as what he's been able to do. Like De Zerbi is a very good manager, but I think Conte has that ability to make players to that next level. We saw that with Chelsea in 2017 when Marcos Alonso they didn't want him, but he wanted him, and he made him fit perfect in that 3-4-3, I believe, that they were playing him. And like it's to me, it's you got a guy who can get the best out of players. And look at Romelu Lukaku is another one. Guy was like invisible with Manchester United, was in and out of the lineup, comes to Inter, which he really wanted him with Chelsea, brings him with Inter, and this guy is flourishing and is one of the best strikers in football right now. So I think that Conte has the ability to get this team into the direction it should go in. The problem with a team like Inter, Juve, Milan, those are clubs that are so used to winning that they don't want to see losing. And if you don't see immediate results, they don't care what you've been able to do on the pitch. If the W's are not coming, if the trophies are not coming, your leash is very short.
So let's take a look at the game itself. Inter on the road at Atalanta. I see, unfortunately, I follow a lot of Interisti like myself, and that's not the unfortunate part. The unfortunate part is there's so much negativity. I see a lot of people tweeting about how, this is going to be another loss. This is going to be another terrible weekend. I think if I take myself out of my Inter bubble, Atalanta have probably even more issues at the current moment than Inter as far as recent form, as far as inconsistencies and injuries on their back line. So yeah, I mean, you've got, and for what it's worth, midweek they were just decimated by Liverpool. Obviously that's a tough team, to go up against in a Champions League match, but they did lose that midweeker 5-0. The same week that Inter fell to Real Madrid on the road 3-2. Both of these teams would love a victory in Serie A to snap out of their funk. Obviously with Inter's recent form, I'm not bullish on the Nerazzurri. Well, two Nerazzuris this weekend, but on the Inter side of it, I don't think they're going to lose this match. I could see. I think the official pick that I made was a 2-1 for Inter, and that was I was boosted a little bit this morning upon seeing that Romelu Lukaku was back in the squad from a muscular injury. We didn't think he'd be back until after the international break, so even if he doesn't play the game from the start, he could be an impact substitute around the 65th or 70th minute, which means Conte would probably put him in the 80th minute, but that's another issue. But no, I think my official pick would be 2-1 Inter. I could see goals for Lautaro, who I think is snapping back into form. He was fantastic against Real Madrid. You could argue he was the best player on the pitch in that game. And I could see Lukaku scoring in the second half after coming on as a sub. So I could see it maybe being 1-1. I'm going to give the Inter edge in a 2-1. I think it'd be great to head into the international break with a win. Joe, I'll let you get the next pick. How do you see this one playing out? Atalanta hosting Inter.
Yeah, I have it as a close match as well. I went with a 3-2 Inter win. I'm not terribly confident in it. I think both teams are really struggling defensively. Yes, they both played really good teams in the Champions League. And in Atalanta's case, I mean, Liverpool's probably got the most devastating counterattack on the planet. So the way Atalanta played, that was just a terrible matchup for them. But we've seen it also in Serie A against clubs not as good as Liverpool. Inter's conceding a lot of goals as well. With Lukaku, I'd be a little bit concerned even if he came on late, just because Lorenzo Insigne had a very similar injury, and he did play a full match against Benevento after the injury, but the very next match he pulled up again, and thankfully he pulled up early so it wasn't as severe, and he's already come back. So that's a bit of a risky play. I think I agree that Lautaro he was probably the man of the match against Real Madrid. Even Perisic has been okay for me. I mean, he scored, I think, 2 matches in a row in a position that's not his natural position, and obviously he's no Lukaku. Maybe Alex, I don't know if you think Sanchez will get back in there. I know he recently returned to the squad, so that provides a little bit of depth there. And
I think he'll play. I think he could come on as a sub. He's still finding his form. He's not been the same guy from last season, but he's dealt with a lot already this year. So hopefully he'll find his form soon.
Yeah, and then I'll quickly touch on Barella because you mentioned how Mina said how do you take him off there. I think to me that's an indication that Inter probably prioritizes Serie A slightly above the Champions League. And you have to be careful in this crazy season. You also have to make sure that, yeah, of course, winning the Scudetto is the target, but you could just as easily fall out of the Champions League qualification spots, right? So with Barella playing that many minutes, you need him in this match against Atalanta because other than Lukaku, Barella is probably the only Inter player that's been consistently performing at a really, really high level. So I think he's key to that Inter midfield. And I'll give them the slight edge. But with one more thing with Atalanta that's really been hurting them is their wing back play has, I don't know if it's just the loss of Timothy Castagna or if it's something else, but that's a part of their game that's really important. And if they're, if Hateboer and Gozens is hurt, so that's another big loss. And I think Mojica has been filling in for Gozens, and that is a step down. He's not as good as Gozens, definitely not as good as Castagna. So it's interesting. 2 teams that play with wing backs. I would give Inter the edge there. And so I'm going to give Inter the win.
Jerry, what do you think? Well, hold on. You're coming in really low for me.
Hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Freezing. That's why. See Joe perfect. Oh, there you go. You're good now. You're good. You're back.
There we go.
I think Inter's gonna beat the crap out of Atalanta like 2-0, 3-1. I don't like Atalanta. Maybe my biasness a little bit. I think that they didn't do enough in the transfer market to get better. I had to take a lot of heat, but Lazio not getting enough depth. I think that Atalanta's on the opposite end. I think they're the one that don't have enough depth when they have injuries, and you're seeing it now. I'm looking at their squad right now, okay, and like Mattia Caldera is out, and even if he was in, he doesn't really give me a step up. Martin de Roon and Robin Gosens are out, but like look at their back end. Like Palomino, Jim City, Sutalo, if I said it right. And then to call off the bench, you got Christian Romero. Christian Romero, guys. You got to give me a fucking break, Christian Romero. This guy conceded the most fouls, the yellow cards last season. Like, this is a reckless player, man. Like, you couldn't make your defense any worse by getting, like, Christian Romero. I just don't like their back end. And I think that's what's finally going to catch up to them. He can only score 5 goals a game for so long. You need to like learn how to defend and start earning clean sheets and preventing teams from scoring. You can't always rely on Duvan Zapata scoring your goals. I find that Ilicic, he has looked good in the games I've seen, like I've been able to watch, but I still don't think he's at that level that he was at last year prior to leaving, where he really inspired and made Atalanta a better team. Luis Muriel has been good off the bench, but like Joe said, their wing back position is very questionable, and I just don't like what they offer. It's look what they started against Sampdoria in the middle. You got Di Paoli, who came from Sampdoria, I believe, and I don't like him. You got Mojica, like Joe said, is a step down, and Lammers hasn't really done anything for me but score like one impressive goal. And Malinowski, he can strike from a distance, but you never know what you're gonna get out of Malinowski. So there's pieces here, but I just don't think it's that spark is not there like it was last year. I think that there was like a momentum ride where they were riding that high, where they were winning so many games on in a row, and they were doing something really well. And like as soon as they lost that mojo, that step where they got that loss, it just starts to go downhill. And for me, I just think that it's just going to get worse for Atalanta before it gets better. And I think that they're going to lose tomorrow. And Inter has a lot of depth. And I think, Joel, you mentioned this before. They have one of the best bench squads in Serie A behind up there with Juventus. And I think that a game like tomorrow will be tested now because Atalanta's bench depth squad is not nearly as good as Inter, and this is where they have the upper hand. And if Conte really manages his lineup properly and uses an Eriksen tomorrow, that can really come to his advantage. I'm no expert about Atalanta, guys. I know I would love to break down and say why. I just think that there's just too many young players on this squad where they don't have enough experience. There's no veterans that can come in, step in, and make that difference when there's guys that are hurt. And they sold a few of the players that really made a difference last year. Like you said, Timothy Castagne. Yeah, people are saying, well, he's only one player he sold. But maybe that one player actually made that much of a difference last year to make your team better. And now you took that one piece out, and it's really rippling effect everything. So I'm gonna go with Inter winning tomorrow, 2-0, 3-1. That's.
If I could add a point, you mentioned veteran players. They do have one veteran who's really, really good in Papu Gomez.
Yeah.
But he hasn't been scoring lately, and he was kind of carrying Atalanta earlier in the year. Even when they were winning matches, I think their first match was against Torino, and Torino, held their own against Atalanta. Just Atalanta early in the season were very clinical. They against Lazio they did it as well. They didn't have that many chances, but when they did, they put the ball in the back of the net. And if that goes down, which it seems like their finishing hasn't been quite as good lately, the results are not coming now.
That's a good point, Joe. That's a good point. If you're only getting three chances a game, and you're scoring three chances, that means that you're not very. It means you're very decisive and clinical on your chances, but you're not really doing anything else throughout the game, and you're hoping for the best on the one or two breaks you get in a whole game, which tells that you're not really doing much more than you should,
right,
to help your side win, which is a good point, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get picks on two more games, and I do want to get Joe's expertise on Napoli. They're away at Bologna on Sunday. That'll be a 6 p.m. Italian time kickoff, 12 noon for those of us here in the East Coast of North America. And Joe, I want to start here. You mentioned earlier, and I agree that there's been some overreaction, okay? Because a lot of Napoli supporters were really upset about the 0-2 loss to Sassuolo. But again, I don't know how any fan base, especially a team that's played very well overall this year, is going to try and call it a season after one defeat like that when you're only 5 matches into the year. So kind of your takeaway, what do they need to improve upon from that Sassuolo match if they're going to come away victorious and get back on track against Bologna? And what's your pick? Because I do have Napoli. I'm going 2-0 for Napoli. I think they're going to make a statement coming back and winning this game.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things Napoli need to do is they need to be a bit more creative. And one of the things, one thing we've seen when Lorenzo Insigne is not in this squad, their creativity is really lacking. Fabian has his good days and he has his bad days. I happen to be very high on him, but there are a lot of Serie A fans, a lot of Napoli fans that don't like him because he's not terribly consistent. We were also playing without Zielinski, Elmas as well, but Zielinski is more important to this squad, and it's only one player, and every team has COVID cases. But we had matches where we were playing in the match against Real Sociedad. Our midfield was Diego Demme, Stanislav Lobotka, and Timothy Bakayoko, which is 3 holding midfielders. We managed to pull out a win there, but you're not going to get much creativity out of those guys. Initially, I was concerned about this match against Bologna because they have the types of players that can hurt Napoli. I mean, we saw it in the Europa League against Rijeka, which is a Croatian side, where they have a couple of fast strikers, and don't be surprised if a Serie A team signs them, because it kind of, I felt like, watch Napoli's going to sign one of these guys, kind of like how Milan signed Haug, who scored against them in the Europa League. Sometimes that's the stage for these guys, but Bologna has that type of player, Musa Barrow, Orsolini, Soriano. They can get you on the break. They're quick. They've shown that they can finish. Musa Barrow scored a really nice goal, I think, against Cagliari. The key difference, though, is we were playing that match against Rijeka for the most part without Insigne. He came off the bench, and when he did, we looked better. And we were also playing that match without Bakayoko, who's proven to be really important to the squad. You can see why Gattuso wanted him so much, for what he does on the defensive side of the ball. So because of those two guys being in the squad, and I'd also add that I think a lot of people have been pretty harsh on Dries Mertens lately because he's not scoring, but I think he's also played well. And again, with Insigne in the squad, he's that much better because of the chemistry they've developed over the years. So I've got Napoli winning this match 3-1.
What about you, Jerry?
I'm going to go with Napoli, probably 2-0, 2-1. I think they'll bounce back. Bologna has shown to be a difficult opponent. The only thing that scares me about Bologna is that you never know what they have a good game, a bad game, but never in between. And I think that Napoli will bounce back and they'll have a strong performance on Sunday. I didn't watch the Europa League game. I know that based on Twitter was talking about very slow start, but as the game progressed, it got better and Napoli started to get into their gear and started to take the game. And that's something with Napoli too, actually. They sometimes start a little too slow. And I saw that with Benevento, actually. In the first half hour, they were really non-existent. And Benevento scored first from Roberto Insigne. And then right after that, though, it's amazing. Sometimes teams maybe play better off being scored on first, and it woke them up. And from the 30th minute on, Napoli just took the game to Benevento. And I saw that against Sassuolo as well. Whereas Sassuolo got that first goal late, and then all of a sudden Napoli started getting better chances, started taking the game to Sassuolo. And I honestly thought that Napoli were the better team last Sunday. So sometimes you just don't get the breaks that you want. Dries Mertens should score that shot in the back post there. But I don't like to be so critical on players like that because you try being in that situation and being in that moment. It's not always easy. It looks easier on TV, and you think, oh, yeah, I would have got that maybe, or that's an easy play. But in hindsight, it's not always works out how you want it to play out. So I thought that they
if I could add two quick points there, that I absolutely agree, Jerry, that Napoli has started slow, and the reason why they look good in the second half is because Gattuso gives them a big kick in the ass at halftime. The other thing that I think is going to help Napoli in this match is another player that's been in a bit of a funk lately is Victor Osimhen. And I don't see Bologna playing the type of game where they just sit back and defend. I think they're going to try to attack, and that's going to create space, and that's where Osimhen does his best work. And then that creates chances for the rest of the team.
That's actually a good point. Bologna doesn't have a good defense, but they have that one guy, Tamiyasu. I love that guy. That guy there is a good player. Great signing by Bologna. He won't be there long. I think he'll be sold within a season or two.
Yeah, he was really close to going to Milan in the most recent window, and I'm very glad he didn't because I rate him. I think he's really good.
I think he's very good, and he makes a very big difference in the back. Bologna just picked up more injuries this past week. That didn't help them. I don't recall who it was. I think maybe it was Sansone or Soriano. I think it was Sansone, but one of the two. But I know that they just picked up a significant injury that doesn't help. So I'm going to go with Napoli. I just think that things are going to turn around. Napoli fans, don't panic. This team has a lot of depth, probably the most depth, I would say, in Serie A since January, where they have made a lot of significant moves, gotten much better. Just because you lose one game doesn't mean it's the end all be all. Like it's a condensed season. There's a lot of competition, a lot of games. You're gonna have losses this week, but based on like what I saw last year with Lazio and how everything was going, I just think that Napoli's season it's a long road and things will turn around.
So real quick, I know Joe and I both have to wrap it up. Our kids are getting up from naps here. So Joe, let me go to you first. Milan against Verona. That's the primetime game Sunday night, 8:45 p.m. Italian time. Verona are experts in grinding out results. They've taken a 1-1 from Juventus. They did this. They were masters at this even last season, taking victories and draws. I think they're going to draw with Milan. I see maybe a 1-1 in this game. So I do see Milan dropping points here. What do you think?
I think Milan's going to bounce back. I don't think Ibra is going to be too happy about that unbeaten streak coming to an end. I'm also one of I think I may be in the minority that I'm still pretty down on Verona. I think the losses of the key players, Rachmani, Kumbula, Amrabat, I don't think they've fully recovered from that with the players that they have. Juric is doing a great job again, but I think Milan's going to win that one.
What do you think, Jerry? And then we'll wrap it up.
I'm going with Verona 2-1. I think that when you go through that long stretch of unbeaten, it can really psychologically start to be the downfall. I don't know. I think that in that dressing room, I think they've gotten a lot of results. A little fortunate, some very deserving, but they just haven't really convinced me fully yet. And I think a team like Verona, who showed against Juventus that they can compete with some of the big guys, and this is a team that behind a good coach who can just keep it together, play a simple game, and I think that they will make it really difficult for Milan on Sunday.
Well, make sure you follow the show on Twitter at CalcioConPod. Follow Joe. Joe, you're at Joe _Fischetti. Is that correct? Or Joe _Fischetti 5.
Yeah.
Oh, Alex.
Yeah.
One last thing. I didn't give my pick for the Lazio Juventus because
Oh shit, you didn't?
I didn't, and I'm gonna go 2-1 Juventus because I'm the biggest mush. So I'm gonna mush fucking Juventus. Okay. So I'm going.
You realize that saying it out loud, I think you're gonna double cancel the mush, but it is. What it is.
No, I'm going. Well, my match preview says 2-1 Juventus before you guys asked me. Okay. So I'm going with Juventus because I am the biggest. I'm not touching Lazio. So.
All right. He's at J Mancini 8 on Twitter. I'm at Alex Donno. The show is at CalcioConPod. We'll talk to you guys next time on another episode of the Calcio Connection podcast. Ciao.